Poverty wages! What's outrageous? 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 Poverty wages! What's outrageous?
Okay, so we're here with Sandy Hudson, co-founder of Black Lives Matter Toronto, and one of the first questions I wanted to ask you was, on a recent podcast, you and Nora Loretto mentioned that the labor movement is sitting on quite a repository of money, resources, spaces, things that we can use as a movement in combating Doug Ford. What do you see that they can do, and what types of strategies should they be implementing to re-energize and activate people who haven't been involved in a long time?
I think that we really need to be looking at a long game here. I mean, it's going to be a long 4 years, but it's really going to be a long decade, to be honest. If we remember what happened when Mike Harris got into power, we're still feeling the effects of the cuts that government made today. And so we're going to need to start training people from yesterday, to be able to fight back on the types of cuts that we're going to see in this province, and to be an effective fight back, a sustainable fight back 10 years down the road. And for me, I think that unions are a no-brainer when it comes to resources. They have so many resources and they are everywhere. I think they're best placed to make sure that we as a people are as prepared as possible to take on power in this province.
One of the things that was interesting in the past few years is how quickly the narrative has changed around things like colonization, anti-black racism, those types of issues, and that does not happen inside of Queen's Park or on Parliament Hill. That's been movements. So can you tell us a little bit about how social movements can change the discussion around us in a way that would be beneficial to working people in Ontario?
Well, this is why it's so important to support social movements who are doing this work on the ground. A cultural shift like having politicians and media talk about anti-black racism and understand that that's what it is, it doesn't happen from people in power, it happens from the bottom up. 5 years ago, no one was talking about anti-black racism in a public sphere. No one really understood what it was. And people would look at us when we would mention it as though, what are you talking about? You should just be talking about racism. But our persistence in making sure that message got out and shifting culture is one of the biggest victories that we've had. And it's groups like ours, I Don't Know More, and all sorts of other groups who are managing to shift the culture around the way that we talk about issues that are going to be extremely important to support in the next 4 to 10 years. Because the other side is trying to shift culture too. They're trying to shift it towards white supremacy. They're trying to shift it towards a place where people don't get to live with dignity. And so we're going to have to give people on the ground the tools to really change things in their community first, and then it'll climb it up. It doesn't trickle down, we got to climb up.
One of the other interesting things I've noticed about the 15 and Fairness struggle has really linked up non-union workers with precarious workers in food service, retail, gig economy, all these other sectors that aren't traditionally where the labor movement fights, but that synthesis has been happening and is accelerating, as we saw from the few thousand people that you just spoke in front of. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and the creative strategies around linking different workers in different places?
Well, this is the thing, things are changing everywhere, and we have to respond to that. We can't stick with the same organizing strategies that we've had for decades. The reality is that, power has figured out what works for us and has shifted around that and said, okay, so we're just going to make it harder for you to unionize by creating a gig economy. This is how you're going to get your jobs now. And we need to figure out how to support workers in a more sustainable way that doesn't just rely on the same organizational strategies that we had in the last few decades. That's not to say throw everything out. Let's keep what works, but let's also be creative about how we can create these linkages. And that's very, very important. The 15 in Fairness campaign has managed to start doing that, and I'm really excited about that, and I hope it continues. This is what we need.
Yeah. One of the things that's come up too in the speeches today in front of Queen's Park was how marginalized communities are going to be the first ones hit by this stuff. Why does the state act in this way? Why does the Conservative Party act specifically in this way? And what types of struggles can allies outside of those marginalized communities feed into? What's the best way for them to contribute?
Look, they know that for groups like mine, like Black people in this province, we're a minority. In the city of Toronto, there's only 8% of us, and they're always looking to be reelected. They're looking at power, and they think that nobody cares about us, which is why when our strategy, we have to make these kinds of big interruptions to make sure that nobody can ignore us. And quite frankly, that's the way that power operates. They're going to take a look and say who matters the least. People who are in poverty, people who are immigrants who are already precarious in their lives, let alone their work, people who are desperate and perhaps won't take the type of actions that can't afford to take the type of actions and risks that others like us can. That's what they do, because it's easier for them to do that. And so it's so important for those of us who can take risks to do that and take those risks for those communities if we're really concerned about justice.
On a recent episode of a podcast I was listening to, one of the hosts said, revolution is always an option. What does that look like? What does that mean?
I'm always thinking about like what brings us closer to changing the entire system. And we should all be thinking that. I think that oftentimes people criticize activists by saying like, what do you really want? But like, what is the end goal here? Like, what does it look like? I just want to say that nobody knows what the end goal is for anything. Even the right wing or people who are trying to keep the status quo, everything's a process. They're always changing things. They're always introducing new bills, new laws, whatever. So we don't need to know exactly what it looks like, but we do need to know what it doesn't look like, and I think we know that inherently. And every time we say, okay, I'm not going to stand for this. We're not going to stand for poverty level wages. We're not going to stand for back to work legislation. We're not going to stand for white supremacists organizing on our street. We're not going to stand for police officers killing members of the Black community indiscriminately. We're not going to do that. That to me is shifting ourselves closer and closer to a revolution. And it's going to take those types of actions. It's going to take training people on the ground, and it's going to take persistence, dogged determination.
Awesome. Sandy Hudson, co-founder of Black Lives Matter Toronto. Thank you so much.
Thank you.